Buying a home is such a big life goal for a lot of people, but man, it is expensive. Whether it's your first house or your 20th, it's not cheap these days. Now, a lot of buyers budget for their down payment and their monthly mortgage when they're ready to buy a house, but then get blindsided at the closing table when they owe thousands of dollars between closing costs and prepaids. And those surprise costs can add up and really kill the mood when you're trying to buy a house. But here's the good news. Those fees are not set in stone, and there are ways we can go about getting them reduced or flat out eliminated. Now, in this video, I'm going to cover 3 different tactics you can use to reduce or eliminate your closing costs if you live in the St. Louis area. And you can use one of these strategies if you want, or combine 2 of them to save even more money. By the way, Jacob Peistrup here. Welcome to the Living St. Louis channel. Now, let's get right into it. Before we talk about getting rid of your fees at the closing table, first, we got to understand them, because not everything that you pay at closing is a closing cost. Anytime you buy or sell a house, you are always going to have some amount of closing costs. Buyers almost always have more closing costs compared to sellers, especially when they're using a loan to finance the purchase rather than paying cash. Now, when you're buying a house, there are actually 4 different buckets that you should budget for. Now, the first big one is your down payment. It is a percentage that you pay of the purchase price and then finance the rest. Sometimes your down payment can actually be 0% and anything above that. It really ranges. And then you've got closing costs. Closing costs are the combination of lender fees and title fees. When it's all said and done, closing costs usually come in between 2% and 4% of the purchase price. Next, you're going to have prepaid taxes and insurance due at closing. And depending on the home you're buying, your prepaids can range from a couple $100s to a couple thousand. And then finally, you have inspection costs. Now, this is the one cost on this list that is not paid at the closing table. They're typically paid during the inspection period, and they can range from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 depending on how big the house is and how many different inspections you're doing, because not all of them are going to apply to every single house. Usually you'll have the building inspection, oftentimes a termite inspection, radon, and depending on if the house has a pool, septic system, well, stuff like that, you will get separate inspections for each of those items. Now, in this video, I'm really talking about closing costs and prepaids specifically, how to reduce them or get them down to 0. Because aside from your down payment, those 2 costs can be a big chunk of money that you got to bring to the closing table. Now, your closing costs are your title fees and your lender fees. But what does that mean? Title fees are what title companies charge to give you title insurance. In other words, they give you clean title to the house you're buying. Sometimes those also include processing fees, paperwork fees, and wire fees. Now, the title fees really vary depending on the title company you're working with. And then you've got lender fees. Lender fees are charged by whatever lender you're using to finance the purchase of the home. And these typically include broker fees, loan origination, processing, underwriting, appraisal, discount points if that applies to you, and sometimes there are other miscellaneous fees that add up from your lender. Lender fees vary based on the lender you're working with and the type of loan you're using, because lender fees are all going to be different depending on if you're using a conventional loan, VA, FHA, USDA. Those are all going to be a little bit different. Now, when we talk about reducing or eliminating your closing costs, keep in mind, they don't just magically disappear. We're just changing who pays them so that it's not you. Let's say you're buying a $300,000 house, which can get you a pretty decent house in a lot of areas of St. Louis. Like I said, you're going to have 2 to 4% on average of closing costs associated with buying that house. So if the purchase price is $300,000, your closing costs could be anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000 on top of your down payment. So let's talk about how to get rid of them. Option number 1. Let me introduce you to a loan product called the Bagel Loan. Why is it called the Bagel Loan? Because bagel looks like a big ol' 0, and that's what your closing costs are going to be if you use this loan. Now, this is a really special loan product you can only get by working with American Mortgage Corporation. Stuart is the president of American Mortgage Corporation, and he's been in a few YouTube videos with me. He is by far our go-to mortgage partner for any of our buyers or clients looking to refinance. Now, here's how it works. If you're borrowing more than $200,000 for the loan, and you close with a title company that Stuart has an agreement with, Stuart covers all the title fees and then waives all the lender fees for you. Now, if you want to close with a different title company that is outside Stuart's network, that's totally fine. The Bagel Loan will probably cover the majority of their title fees, and then you pay whatever's left over. Or you can use tactic number 2, which I'll explain in a minute. Now, like I said, your closing costs do not magically disappear. What's happening is Stuart has an agreement with select title companies where they reduce their title fees for you, and then Stuart pays those fees. And then he waives all of his lender fees that most banks would normally charge their clients. He's not charging you a higher rate, he's not rolling these costs into the loan, and he's not hiding those fees somewhere sneaky. So why can Stuart pull this off? He keeps his costs very low, he runs a very lean mortgage company, and he is a mortgage banker, not a mortgage broker. And that difference is very important. Now, Stuart does not have any commissioned loan officers or heavy overhead costs. So he can take all that money that he saves, pay his clients' closing costs, and still make enough profit to keep his company running. He handles underwriting internally, he has more flexibility with underwriting, can close faster, and saves you money. And that's the important part. So remember that $300,000 purchase price where you might have $6,000 to $12,000 of closing costs? Stuart can make those closing costs go away. But keep in mind, you're still going to have to cover your prepaid taxes and insurance, which I'll get to that in a minute. And it doesn't matter if you're planning on using a conventional loan, FHA, VA, Stuart covers it all with the Bagel Loan. Now, what's even better? The Bagel Loan works in Missouri and Illinois. So regardless of what side of the river you're buying on, Stuart's got you covered. And here's a really, really big thing. When you get pre-approved with Stuart, he gives you, the buyer, and your real estate agent the ability to go into your portal and generate your own pre-approval letter for any amount up to the max budget you've been given. That might sound like a small thing, but most lenders don't do that. And it is a really, really big deal because what usually happens is your lender gives you your pre-approval up to, let's say, $500,000. And let's say you're looking at homes in the low to mid 400,000s. So, you have your lender give you a pre-approval up to 450 because you don't want the sellers to know how much you can really afford. And then anytime you want a pre-approval letter that says 425, 475, a different amount, you have to wait for your lender to generate that and send it to you. Stuart lets you do that by yourself. Easy peasy. Now, if you want to learn more about the Bagel Loan, just get in touch with Stuart, call him, text him, email, or you can literally just go on Google and Google the Bagel Loan and his website will pop up right there. He does such a great job with all of our clients. So if you need any kind of mortgage help, Stuart's your guy. And the best news is you can stack the Bagel Loan with the next 2 strategies I'm going to talk about. Stuart can cover your closing costs, but let's talk about how you can get some money from the seller to cover everything else. Strategy number 2 to reduce your closing costs is seller concessions. Now, a seller credit or a seller concession, they're called both, is money that you get back at the closing table that comes out of the seller proceeds. So the seller is giving you money back at the closing table that normally they would keep. Now, this is something you negotiate with the seller either in your initial offer to purchase the house. There's a line where you can enter seller concessions, or you negotiate this later on, usually during the inspection period. That's very common. And then you amend the sale contract to reflect your credits and concessions. Let's say you find a lot of issues with the house and it's going to take some work to fix. You can negotiate with the seller to give you a certain amount of money back at the closing table. Now, how this works, instead of just dropping the sale price of the home by, let's say, $10,000, you are getting $10,000 back from the seller at the closing table. You can then use that $10,000 to cover your closing costs, or if you're already using the Bagel Loan to get those closing costs down to zero, you can take the seller credit and use that to pay down your prepaids. When you buy a house, there is always one seller credit already baked in, and that is prorated property taxes. When you close on the house, the seller is going to give you a credit for the property taxes that have added up during the time that the seller has lived in that house for the year. Because what's going to happen is you're paying the property taxes for the entire year in December. So basically, the prorated taxes that the seller pays you at closing get higher and higher the later into the year you buy the house. So if you close at the end of January, the seller is going to pay you 1 month of property taxes, whereas let's say you close December 1st, the seller is going to pay you 11 months of property taxes. So the prorated taxes might be a little, might be a lot, but you are almost always still going to have to put 3 months of taxes and insurance into an escrow account when you buy the house. That's what I'm referring to when I say your prepaid taxes and insurance. Putting those prepaids into escrow is usually required for the loan. Now, not every lender requires an escrow account, but a lot of them do. And they do that to make sure that your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes actually get paid. So you take your closing credits, however much you got from the seller, and then you pay your taxes and insurance with those credits. If you have excess credits that are more than your prepaids, you can also use the money to do a 2-1 buy down to get your rate a little bit lower, where you basically use the seller's money to lower your interest rate on the mortgage for 2 years. Now here's the catch. There are limits on how much money the seller's allowed to give you depending on the kind of loan you're using. Typically that limit is 3 to 5%. So let's use that same example from before of buying a $300,000 house. You work with Stuart, you get the Bagel Loan, you get those closing costs down. Let's say you also get a $5,000 credit from the seller and you use that to pay for all of your prepaid taxes and insurance. Suddenly, the only money you need to bring to closing is the down payment. Not bad, right? Let's talk about one more option because let's say you want to build a new house instead of buying an existing one. The good news is sometimes builders offer incentives where they will give you credits at closing to lower your costs. So strategy number 3 is new construction incentives. All of this that I'm about to talk about depends on the builder you're working with. Some builders offer incentives where they will either discount their prices, they'll give you free upgrades, or they will offer a credit at the closing table. In my real estate team's experience dealing with builders, they don't do discounts very often, but when they do, it tends to be towards the end of the year or when they're closing out a previous phase of a community in order to open up a new phase. So let's say they're moving from phase 1 and they're trying to sell those lots fast and then open up phase 2 within a particular community. Now, sometimes builders offer incentives to get you to use their own lender. And that's totally up to you if you want to do that, but keep in mind, sometimes those lenders charge higher interest rates or higher fees to cancel out the credit they're giving you at closing. So read the fine print. Another thing is that some builders also offer credits if you are a veteran, first responder, or a teacher. So I'll give you a real life example. Right now, we have a client who's building a new house and he's a veteran. He's using a VA loan and Stuart's doing the loan for him. So he's already got a 0% down loan. He's using the Bagel Loan, so he's got 0 closing costs. And this builder gives a $3,000 credit if you're a veteran. So he's got a 0% down payment, no closing costs, and a $3,000 credit that he can use to pay prepaids or take that money and go buy some furniture or something. Point being, I highly recommend using the Bagel Loan and then combining that with seller credits or builder credits if possible. And Stuart's team can close the deal in 10 days, which is literally a third of the time that it takes most mortgage companies. Another house buying hack is that mortgage interest is paid in arrears. So let's say you close on a house in August. Now, at the closing table, you are going to be paying the interest for the remainder of the month of August. So that's one of your prepaids you got to think about. And then you don't have a mortgage payment at all in September. Your first mortgage payment is going to be in October, which covers the interest for the month of September. So you close in August, you get at least a month no mortgage payment until October. We've been working with Stuart for a while, and Stuart has been in the mortgage business for decades. He knows his stuff. He processes and underwrites everything internally, which really speeds up the process. He keeps his costs low. He does not have any loan officers he's got to pay a bunch of commissions to. And that is why the Bagel Loan exists in the first place. He takes his amount and then gives the rest back to his clients in the form of paying their closing costs. Now, based on our experience working with him, Stuart offers the same or better interest rates. He has more loan products to choose from, closes quicker, and saves you money. So we can really mix and match and get creative depending on your situation to help you save as much money as possible at the closing table. If you're ready to start that conversation, again, get in touch with Stuart, call him, text him, email, whatever works for you. I'll also have his website linked in the description down below so you can go check that out. My real estate agents and I love him, and so do our clients. So Stuart has been wonderful to work with. I highly recommend him. Outside of that, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.